April 6, 1945. 1500 hours. Battleship Yamato, Bungo Strait, Japan. Corporal Takeshi Nakamura stood on the forward deck of the mighty Yamato, watching American reconnaissance planes circle in the distance like cautious seagulls. Around him, his fellow Special Naval Landing Force Marines pointed and laughed at the tiny specks against the blue sky. "Look at them!" sneered Private Kenji Sato, spitting over the rail. "They're afraid to come closer. They know our guns will swat them from the heavens like insects." The laughter rippled across the deck as 3,332 men prepared for what they knew would be their final mission. Operation Tengo, the last sortie of the combined fleet, would send Yamato to beach herself on Okinawa and fight as an unsinkable fortress until every last shell was expended and every man was dead. But first, they would have to reach Okinawa. And those tiny American planes circling overhead were about to teach the Marines of the Imperial Navy a lesson in the mathematics of modern warfare that would turn their confident laughter into the silence of the grave in exactly 4 hours and 53 minutes. For the Japanese Marines who mocked American air power from the deck of history's mightiest battleship, the greatest shock would not be death itself, but the revelation that their floating fortress was nothing more than a steel coffin waiting for American aviation to close the lid. The pride of the empire. Yamato represented everything Japan believed about naval superiority and technological achievement. At 72,800 tons fully loaded, she was the largest battleship ever constructed, mounting 9 18.1-inch guns that could hurl 3 200-pound shells over 25 miles with devastating accuracy. Her armor belt was 16 inches thick, her turrets were protected by 25 inches of steel, and her designers had boasted that she was unsinkable. The ship had been built in absolute secrecy at the Kure Naval Arsenal between 1937 and 1941, representing the pinnacle of Japanese naval engineering and the embodiment of Yamato spirit, the mystical essence of Japanese racial superiority that would triumph over Western material advantage through spiritual strength and superior will. Her construction had consumed resources equivalent to building 5 aircraft carriers, but Japanese naval doctrine in the 1930s still believed that massive guns and thick armor would dominate future sea battles. The Americans might have more ships, but they had nothing that could match Yamato's combination of firepower and protection. The Marines aboard Yamato were elite troops of the Special Naval Landing Force, the Imperial Navy's equivalent of the U.S. Marine Corps. These men had fought from the Aleutians to the Solomon Islands, earning reputations as fanatical fighters who preferred death to surrender. Their confidence in their ship matched their confidence in their own fighting ability. Both seemed unshakable. The desperate gamble. By April 1945, Japan's strategic situation had become hopeless, but military leaders refused to acknowledge defeat. The American invasion of Okinawa represented the final threat to the home islands, and Japanese commanders were prepared to sacrifice everything to prevent American forces from establishing bases within bombing range of Tokyo. Operation Tengo was conceived as the ultimate expression of Japanese fighting spirit, a suicide mission that would demonstrate to both enemies and allies that Japan would never surrender. Yamato would sortie with only enough fuel for a one-way trip, accompanied by the light cruiser Yahagi and 8 destroyers in the last organized operation of the combined fleet. The plan was militarily absurd, but symbolically perfect. Yamato would fight her way through the American fleet surrounding Okinawa, beach herself on the island's shores, and use her massive guns as coastal artillery while her crew fought to the death as infantry. The ship's destruction would inspire the Japanese people to resist American invasion with the same fanatical determination. Admiral Seiichi Ito, commanding the Suicide Squadron, understood the mission's hopelessness but accepted it as his duty. His ships would face the entire American Pacific Fleet, with no air cover, no submarine support, and no prospect of survival. The operation represented everything that was both heroic and tragically futile about Japanese military culture. The American response. American intelligence had detected Japanese preparations for the sortie through radio intercepts and reconnaissance flights that revealed unusual activity at Japanese naval bases. The prospect of Yamato reaching Okinawan waters created genuine concern among American commanders who respected the battleship's firepower even while questioning Japanese tactical judgment. Admiral Raymond Spruance, commanding Task Force 58, had at his disposal the most powerful naval aviation force ever assembled. 15 aircraft carriers operating in 4 task groups could launch over 1,000 aircraft, including fighters, dive bombers, and torpedo planes equipped with weapons specifically designed to destroy heavily armored warships. The American response was swift and decisive. Rather than risk surface engagement with Yamato's powerful guns, Task Force 58 would use massed air attacks to sink the Japanese force before it could approach Okinawa. The operation would demonstrate American naval aviation's ability to destroy any target, regardless of size or armor protection. Weather conditions on April 7th were perfect for flying operations. Clear skies, calm seas, and excellent visibility that would allow American pilots to press home their attacks with maximum effectiveness. The Japanese ships would have nowhere to hide from the aerial onslaught that was about to descend upon them. The morning Confidence dawn on April 7th found Yamato and her escorts steaming south through the East China Sea at 22 knots, their crews preparing for what they knew would be their final battle. The morning air was crisp and clear, with unlimited visibility that allowed lookouts to spot American reconnaissance planes maintaining contact from safe distances. The mood aboard Yamato was surprisingly cheerful for men embarking on a suicide mission. The Marines and sailors had accepted their fate with the stoic resignation that Japanese military culture demanded. But they remained confident in their ship's ability to inflict terrible damage on American forces before she was destroyed. Marine Sergeant Hiroshi Yamamoto had served aboard Yamato since her commissioning and considered himself an expert on her capabilities. "The Americans have never faced anything like this ship," he told his men during morning inspection. "Our guns can sink their cruisers with single salvos, and our armor is too thick for their bombs to penetrate." The anti-aircraft crews were particularly confident in their ability to repel air attacks. Yamato mounted 162 anti-aircraft guns of various calibers, including 12 5-inch dual-purpose guns and numerous 25 mm automatic cannons. The ship's fire control systems had been upgraded repeatedly, and her gunners had trained extensively for air defense operations. The reconnaissance phase American reconnaissance aircraft had been shadowing the Japanese force since 0600 hours, maintaining contact while staying beyond the range of Yamato's anti-aircraft guns. The persistent surveillance created tension among the Japanese crews, who understood that every minute of American observation was being used to coordinate the massive airstrike that would inevitably follow. The psychological warfare was deliberate and effective. American pilots made no attempt to hide their presence, circling the Japanese ships openly while broadcasting position reports that Japanese radio operators could intercept and understand. The message was clear. Your location is known, your fate is sealed, and destruction is imminent. Lieutenant Commander Naoyoshi Ishida, Yamato's senior gunnery officer, watched the American planes through his binoculars and felt growing unease despite his professional confidence. "They're planning something systematic," he told Captain Kosaku Aruga. "This isn't random harassment. They're studying us for a coordinated attack." The reconnaissance phase revealed American tactical sophistication that exceeded Japanese expectations. The shadowing aircraft maintained perfect formation discipline, rotated stations to prevent fatigue, and demonstrated communication capabilities that allowed real-time coordination with their parent carriers over 250 miles away. The launch decision. At 1,000 hours, Admiral Mark Mitcher aboard USS Bunker Hill made the decision to launch the strike that would destroy Yamato. Intelligence indicated that the Japanese force was committed to its southern course and would not turn back regardless of American air activity. The opportunity to eliminate Japan's last major naval unit was too valuable to postpone. The strike force assembled represented the largest coordinated air attack ever launched against a single target. From the decks of 11 aircraft carriers, 386 aircraft rose into the morning sky. 180 fighters, 75 dive bombers, and 131 torpedo planes, all armed with weapons specifically chosen for attacking heavily armored warships. The complexity of coordinating such a massive air operation while maintaining formation integrity and target assignment required organizational capabilities that Japanese naval aviation had never possessed. American air groups had perfected these techniques through 3 years of Pacific combat, developing tactics that maximized striking power while minimizing aircraft losses. Flight leaders carried detailed intelligence about Yamato's construction, armor layout, and defensive capabilities. American technical intelligence had analyzed captured Japanese documents and interrogated prisoners to develop attack plans that exploited known weaknesses in battleship design. The final laughter. At 12:20 hours, lookouts aboard Yamato reported large formations of aircraft approaching from the southeast. The initial response among the ship's crew was almost festive. Finally, they would have the opportunity to demonstrate their anti-aircraft capabilities against massed American air attacks. The Marines manning the smaller caliber weapons joked about the target practice they were about to receive. "Count them as they fall," called out Corporal Nakamura to his gun crew. "The Americans are bringing us all the planes we could want to shoot down." The laughter spread throughout the ship as gun crews loaded their weapons and prepared for action. The confidence was genuine. These men truly believed that Yamato's massive bulk and heavy armament made her invulnerable to anything American aircraft could deliver against her. Captain Aruga maintained his position on the bridge wing, calmly observing the approaching formations through his binoculars. He had commanded Yamato for over a year and possessed complete faith in his ship's ability to survive air attacks that had destroyed lesser vessels. The Americans were about to discover what happened when aircraft challenged a properly designed battleship. The first wave arrives. The American attack began at 12:32 hours with strafing runs by F-6F Hellcat fighters that swept across Yamato's superstructure, their .50 caliber machine guns cutting down anti-aircraft crews and creating chaos on the exposed decks. The precision of the attacks immediately demonstrated that American pilots had studied their target carefully. The strafing attacks were followed within minutes by dive bombing runs from SB-2C Helldiver aircraft that approached at steep angles to maximize their chances of penetrating Yamato's armored deck. The 1,000-pound armor-piercing bombs created tremendous explosions that shook the entire ship, but the initial hits failed to cause critical damage to vital systems. The Marines manning anti-aircraft positions fought back with desperate courage, maintaining their fire even as American fighters swept their positions repeatedly. The noise was overwhelming. The roar of aircraft engines, the chatter of machine guns, the crash of exploding bombs, and the screams of wounded men created an audio landscape of industrial violence. Marine Private Sato found himself operating a 25mm gun after the regular crew had been killed by strafing. "They keep coming," he shouted to his loader. "No matter how many we hit, more keep coming." The seemingly endless stream of American aircraft suggested resources that exceeded anything Japanese forces had ever deployed. The torpedo attacks begin. The most dangerous phase of the American attack began at 12:45 hours when TBF Avenger torpedo bombers approached Yamato at low altitude, skimming just above the wave tops to deliver their Mark 13 torpedoes against the battleship's vulnerable underwater hull. These weapons represented the greatest threat to any surface vessel, regardless of armor protection. The torpedo attacks required extraordinary courage from American aircrew who had to maintain steady courses through intense anti-aircraft fire while approaching within 1,000 yards of their target. Many aircraft were shot down during their attack runs, but enough survived to deliver multiple torpedo hits that began the process of Yamato's destruction. The first torpedo struck Yamato's port side at 12:47 hours, creating a massive explosion that sent shock waves throughout the ship. The hit flooded several compartments and created a slight list to port that gradually increased as additional torpedoes found their mark. The mathematical reality of naval warfare was beginning to assert itself. Damage control parties rushed to seal ruptured bulkheads and pump out flooded compartments, but the sheer volume of water entering the ship exceeded their capabilities. Chief Petty Officer Kenji Matsumoto, supervising damage control efforts in the forward section, realized that Yamato was fighting a losing battle against the sea itself, the systematic destruction. The American attack continued with methodical precision as successive waves of aircraft focused on specific areas of the ship to achieve maximum cumulative damage. Dive bombers concentrated on the superstructure and gun turrets while torpedo planes targeted the hull at and below the waterline. By 1300 hours, Yamato had absorbed at least 6 torpedo hits and multiple bomb strikes that had started fires throughout the ship and flooded numerous compartments. The list to port was increasing steadily, making it difficult for anti-aircraft crews to maintain accurate fire against attacking aircraft. The Marines, who had laughed at American Airpower 2 hours earlier, were now fighting desperately to keep their ship afloat, while American planes continued their methodical destruction. The confidence that had characterized the morning had been replaced by grim determination to sell their lives as expensively as possible. Captain Aruga ordered counter-flooding to correct the ship's list, but damage control systems were failing throughout Yamato as fires spread, and electrical power was lost to critical systems. The ship that had been designed to be unsinkable was proving vulnerable to coordinated air attack that exceeded her designer's assumptions. The death spiral. By 1330 hours, Yamato's list had increased to 15 degrees, making normal operations impossible and suggesting that the ship was beyond saving. Additional torpedo hits continued to flood compartments faster than damage control parties could cope, while fires raged unchecked in areas where water pressure had failed. The anti-aircraft guns were gradually being silenced as their crews were killed or wounded. Ammunition supplies were disrupted by bomb damage, or electrical power failed to the fire control systems. American aircraft were encountering decreasing resistance as they pressed home their attacks with growing boldness. Marine Corporal Nakamura, wounded by bomb fragments but still manning his position, watched American planes approach with impunity and realized that Yamato's defenses had been systematically destroyed. "We can't stop them," he told his remaining crew members. "They've beaten us." The psychological impact of watching their mighty ship being methodically destroyed created despair among crew members who had never imagined that anything could threaten Yamato's survival. The reality of American air power was overwhelming every assumption they had held about naval warfare. The final moments, at 14:05 hours, Yamato's list had increased to 35 degrees, making it impossible for the remaining gun crews to elevate their weapons or maintain their footing on the increasingly steep decks. Captain Aruga ordered all hands to abandon ship, but many compartments were already sealed by damage that prevented escape. The final torpedo hits at 14:17 hours caused catastrophic flooding that pushed Yamato beyond her stability limits. The massive battleship began her final roll to port, as water cascaded through bomb holes and torpedo openings that could no longer be contained by her compartmentalization systems. Marine Sergeant Yamamoto found himself sliding across the tilting deck as Yamato rolled past the point of no return. Around him, men were jumping into the sea or being trapped below decks as the ship prepared to take her final plunge. The laughter that had characterized the morning seemed to belong to another lifetime. At 14:23 hours, Yamato capsized completely and began her final descent toward the bottom of the East China Sea. The pride of the Imperial Navy was gone, taking with her over 3,000 officers and men who had believed in her invincibility until the moment American aviation proved them wrong. The explosion. At 14:23 hours and 42 seconds, Yamato's forward magazines detonated in a cataclysmic explosion that was visible from over 100 miles away. The blast created a mushroom cloud that rose 20,000 feet into the air and generated shock waves that were felt aboard American aircraft circling the area. The explosion marked the end of more than just a single warship. It represented the destruction of Japan's faith in battleship supremacy and the traditional naval warfare that had dominated military thinking for centuries. American aviation had demonstrated that no amount of armor or firepower could protect surface vessels from coordinated air attack. Survivors clinging to debris in the oil-covered water witnessed the complete obliteration of what they had considered an unsinkable fortress. The psychological impact was devastating for men who had staked their lives on the superiority of Japanese naval engineering and fighting spirit. The few Americans who witnessed the explosion were awed by its magnitude, but understood its strategic significance. They had participated in the destruction of Japan's last major naval unit, and the final demonstration of American air power's dominance over all forms of surface warfare. The survivor's story of Yamato's crew of 3,332 officers and men, only 269 survived to be rescued by accompanying destroyers. These survivors faced the psychological challenge of explaining how the world's most powerful battleship had been destroyed in less than 5 hours by American aircraft they had initially mocked. The survivors' accounts revealed the systematic nature of American tactics and the overwhelming weight of the air attacks that had destroyed their ship. Many struggled to comprehend how their unsinkable vessel had been reduced to wreckage so quickly by an enemy they had been taught to despise. Corporal Nakamura, pulled from the water by the destroyer Fuyutsuki, spent the rest of his life trying to reconcile his memories of confident laughter with the reality of Yamato's destruction. "We thought we were invincible," he wrote decades later. "The Americans taught us that nothing is invincible when you have enough airplanes." The psychological trauma experienced by survivors extended beyond individual grief to encompass the collapse of fundamental beliefs about Japanese military superiority and the nature of modern warfare. They had witnessed the death of naval tradition and the birth of aviation dominance in the span of a single afternoon. The American achievement. The destruction of Yamato represented the culmination of American naval aviation development that had begun with the attack on Pearl Harbor and evolved through 3 years of Pacific combat. The coordinated strike demonstrated capabilities that no other naval force in the world could match. American losses during the attack were remarkably light. 10 aircraft shot down and 12 aircrew killed or missing. The exchange ratio of American lives for Japanese lives was approximately 1:250, demonstrating the enormous advantage that superior tactics and equipment provided in modern warfare. The technical achievement of coordinating 386 aircraft from multiple carriers in a single strike against a moving target represented organizational capabilities that exceeded anything attempted in previous naval history. American naval aviation had mastered the complexities of mass aerial warfare through systematic training, had portrayed American fighting methods as cowardly reliance on material advantages rather than warrior spirit. Yamato's destruction proved that American materialism could achieve decisive results that Japanese spiritualism could not match or counter effectively. The cultural implications extended beyond military affairs to questions about Japanese national character and destiny. If American technology could destroy Japan's greatest achievements so easily, what did this suggest about Japanese claims to racial and cultural superiority? The ultimate irony. The greatest irony of Yamato's destruction lay in the fact that American aircraft accomplished in hours what Japanese planners had never expected any enemy force to achieve. The ship designed to be unsinkable was sunk by weapons that Japanese doctrine had considered inadequate against heavily armored targets. The laughter that had characterized Japanese attitudes toward American air power at the beginning of the mission was replaced by silence as survivors contemplated the wreckage of their fundamental assumptions about warfare and technology. Their confidence had been as illusory as their ship's invincibility. American success in destroying Yamato validated tactical and technological approaches that Japanese military culture had dismissed as unworthy of true warriors. The victory of material over spirit challenged Japanese beliefs about the sources of military strength. The final recognition. In the end, the Japanese Marines who had laughed at American air power until Yamato sank beneath them learned the ultimate lesson about modern warfare, that industrial capacity, technological sophistication, and organizational efficiency would determine victory regardless of individual courage or fighting spirit. The 5 hours required to destroy history's mightiest battleship represented more than tactical achievement. They marked the moment when Japanese recognition of defeat became psychologically complete. No amount of determination or sacrifice could overcome the mathematical certainties of American industrial superiority. The silence that replaced laughter in Yamato's final moments echoed across the Pacific as Japan, confronted the reality that continued resistance was futile against an enemy whose capabilities exceeded every assumption about what was possible in warfare. The pride of the Imperial Navy had become and combat experience. Admiral Mitcher's after-action report noted that American pilots had pressed home their attacks with skill and courage that proved decisive in achieving rapid destruction of the target. The operation validated American tactical doctrine that emphasized coordinated air power over traditional surface engagement. The strategic impact. The destruction of Yamato eliminated Japan's last major naval unit capable of threatening American operations around Okinawa or any other target. The psychological impact on Japanese military leadership was devastating, as it proved conclusively that American air power could destroy any target regardless of size or protection. Japanese naval officers who learned of Yamato's fate understood that traditional naval warfare had become obsolete, and that Japan possessed no weapons capable of challenging American control of Pacific waters. The loss represented more than tactical defeat. It marked the end of Japanese naval power as a strategic factor. American intelligence analysis of the attack revealed that Japanese tactics remained bound by outdated concepts of naval warfare that emphasized individual ship capabilities over integrated air-sea operations. The Japanese failure to provide air cover for their surface units made their destruction inevitable. International observers who learned about Yamato's destruction recognized that naval warfare had been revolutionized by the demonstration of American air power capabilities. The age of battleship dominance had ended, replaced by aviation that could strike any target with overwhelming force. The cultural shock. For Japanese military culture, the loss of Yamato represented more than material defeat. It challenged fundamental assumptions about spiritual strength overcoming material disadvantage. The ship's destruction by American technical warfare contradicted beliefs about Japanese moral superiority. The speed and completeness of Yamato's destruction shocked Japanese leaders who had expected their greatest warship to inflict significant damage on American forces before being overwhelmed. Instead, American tactics had achieved one-sided victory that demonstrated complete tactical and technological superiority. Japanese propaganda, a monument to the power of American aviation and the obsolescence of Japanese military thinking. For the few survivors who lived to tell the story, Yamato's destruction remained proof that wars were won by industrial systems rather than warrior spirit, by technological advantage rather than moral superiority, and by the side that could build the most aircraft rather than the side that could die most courageously. The laughter had died with their ship, replaced by the understanding that American air power ruled both sky and sea in a war that Japan could never win.